leaving Mehmed II once again as Sultan. Later, Mehmed II was proclaimed Mehmed the Conqueror because of his remarkable achievements during his reign and immediately sought to complete the task of the final conquest of Constantinople, as many of his predecessors had dared to attempt. In an effort to limit any distractions, Mehmed signed peace treaties with Hungary and Venice while preparing his fleet for the future siege of the heart of Byzantium. In 1453, with an army of around 80,000 soldiers or more, over 100 warships, and something previous sultans had lacked, cannons, Mehmed began the campaign that would ultimately be called the Fall of Constantinople. The siege lasted more than 50 days and resulted in a decisive victory for the Ottomans, who declared Constantinople their new capital. Mehmed also proclaimed himself Caesar of the Roman Empire, a title rejected by the Roman Catholic Church but accepted by the Eastern Orthodox Church. The young Sultan then conquered the remaining Byzantine states and continued advancing into Europe. His reign was marked by drastic governmental reforms, the creation of a more centralized bureaucracy, and the appointment of only those who could be loyal to him and his agenda at court, as well as constant negotiations between his empire and the European Christians. One of the most famous storylines is perhaps the relationship between Mehmed II and Vlad III Dracula. As mentioned earlier, two of the sons of Vlad Dracul had been held hostage by Murad II. These boys, Radu and Vlad III Dracula, grew up together with Mehmed, and each developed radically different relationships with him. While Radu chose to remain within the Ottoman Empire and serve as a lifelong friend and ally to Mehmed, Vlad became a stubborn adversary who fought against his contemporaries until his last breath. While some argue that Mehmed's long-standing conflict with the voivode of a much smaller region and military power shows weakness, it instead provides us with deep insight into his personality and mindset before he ultimately abandoned his attempts to overcome and defeat Vlad Dracula. It is recorded that Mehmed said he could not take land from a man who committed such extraordinary deeds, and that such a man was certainly worthy of greater things. These statements from the Sultan himself show not only a level of respect for his opponent, but also confidence in the Ottoman Empire as a whole during his reign. Mehmed was willing to withdraw from a conflict in which he saw little chance of success, knowing he stood at the head of two empires, having more or less absorbed the Byzantine Empire, and understanding that his power could not be so easily strangled. This tone of tolerance extended beyond Mehmed himself and can be seen again during the reign of his son Bayezid II, who claimed the throne after his father's death in 1481. The beginning of Bayezid II's reign as Sultan was likely marked by conflict with his brother Sem. Once his position was secured, Bayezid began implementing changes to his father's policies and placed a strong emphasis on domestic affairs throughout both the East and the West, establishing a more efficiently organized system. Although not entirely remembered for the conflicts in which he participated, Bayezid made notable efforts to conquer new Venetian territories and lands in the Balkans. However, perhaps Bayezid II's most notable decision at the close of the 15th century was his response to the expulsion of both Muslims and Jews from Spain in 1492. Bayezid condemned Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella I and sent an Ottoman fleet to safely transport the expelled Muslims and Jews to his own territories. He instructed every leader under his authority to welcome all refugees and threatened death to those who treated Jews differently from their Muslim counterparts. This exceptional act led to an influx of new skills, improvements, and ideas into the empire, resulting in increased success for the hospitable Sultan. By the end of the 15th century, Bayezid II remained on the Ottoman throne as a respected and prosperous ruler, earning the epithet, the Just. Bayezid may be one of the most underrated rulers of the empire today. He, the Just, like others throughout the rest of the century, achieved remarkable feats that helped propel the Ottoman Empire and its power far into the future. At the beginning of the 16th century, within the Ottoman Empire, Bayezid II had already entered into an intense naval war with the Venetians. This would continue until 1503, ushering in the new century with a desire for further consolidation. The Ottomans, under the command of Admiral Kemal Reis, achieved triumph at the end of this Turkish-Venetian war, ultimately forcing the Venetians once again to sign a peace agreement with the Turks. While this victory served to further strengthen Ottoman power in Europe, conditions in Anatolia were becoming increasingly unstable. By 1511, supporters of the Safavid dynasty began to rebel against the growing dominance of the Ottoman Empire. Although they were forced to retreat following the defeat of their leader Shah Kulu, fierce disputes meanwhile erupted over the succession to the throne between Bayezid's sons, Selim and Ahmed. As both candidates attempted to gather support from various territories and leaders, the Sultan's advisors and the Janissary corps began to show preference towards Selim, alongside Bayezid's growing concern that Ahmed might seek assistance from the Shah of Persia. Finally, in 1512, Sultan Bayezid II made his decision, abdicating in favor of Selim, who would later have his brother killed to prevent further conflict. Bayezid died only 1 month after his retirement. Soon after ascending the throne, Sultan Selim I eliminated all potential threats to his position by executing his brothers and nephews, allowing him to focus solely on external dangers. One such danger manifested in the form of Shah Ismail and his Kizilbash Turkoman supporters in Anatolia. Selim quickly suppressed a Kizilbash-led revolt, then turned his attention to Ismail himself, ultimately defeating the Shah's forces at the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514. While the Safavid forces consisted mainly of cavalry, Selim's army numbered over 100,000 men and could rely on muskets and cannons. By the end of the confrontation, the Ottomans advanced to capture Tabriz, the Safavid capital, before continuing against the Mamluk dynasty in Egypt. Victories followed at the Battle of Marj Dabik in 1516 and the Battle of Rydania in 1517, enabling the Ottomans to conquer Egypt, the Hejaz, and the entire Levant, incorporating them into their empire. Thus, by the time of Selim I's death in 1520, not only had the cultural and geographical core of the empire shifted, but it is believed that his reign resulted in an expansion of approximately 70%. After his father's death, Selim's only son, Suleiman I, became the next and later widely revered Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, known in the West as the Magnificent, and to the Ottomans themselves as the Lawgiver. Suleiman ushered in a period of immense military, legal, and cultural change within the empire. While Sharia, or sacred law, was not something a sultan could alter, Suleiman was able to significantly restructure the legal canon governing criminal law, land tenure, and taxation. This definitive revision became known as the Ottoman Law Code and remained intact for the next 3 centuries. Suleiman also introduced changes to laws affecting the empire's various religions, adopting a similar approach of tolerance to that of the late Bayezid, including the official condemnation of blood libels issued against the Jewish population. At the same time as these legislative and cultural changes occurred within the empire, expansion continued almost immediately beyond its sovereign borders, directing attention toward Christian powers in both Europe and the Mediterranean. Suleiman led his forces to victory at Belgrade in 1521, followed by the long-anticipated conquest of Rhodes in 1522. 4 years later, in a clash with Hungarian forces, the Ottomans not only defeated their enemy but also executed King Louis II of Hungary. When Suleiman encountered the body of the Hungarian monarch, he remarked, "May Allah be merciful to him and punish those who misled him because of his inexperience. I truly faced him with arms, but it was not my wish that he should be cut down in this way before he had scarcely tasted the sweetness of life and royal power." This unexpected power vacuum in Hungary triggered a new conflict for the throne between the Habsburg Archduke of Austria and the Transylvanian voivode. Amid widespread opposition to the prospect of Habsburg control, the Ottoman Sultan decided to recognize John Zápolya as the new vassal king of Hungary. As a further effort to undermine subsequent Habsburg intervention, Suleiman launched another campaign in 1529, this time aimed at Vienna. Unfortunately for the Ottomans, logistical and environmental problems plagued the offensive, forcing the Sultan to abandon the assault. Undeterred, by 1532, the Ottomans again attempted to attack Vienna, but made very little progress after being halted by defensive forces at the Siege of Guns. This convinced Suleiman that Vienna was not a prize easily won. A peace agreement was eventually reached in Constantinople between Archduke Ferdinand I of Austria and the Ottoman Empire the following year, with the terms negotiated by both sides. Not long after, however, the integrity of the agreement deteriorated. When John Zápolya died in 1540, any remaining peace between the Ottomans and the Austrians seemed to collapse entirely. During a series of campaigns and annexations between 1541 and 1543, Hungary was ultimately divided into three separate entities: Habsburg Hungary, the Ottoman vassal state of Transylvania, and Ottoman-occupied Central Hungary. The following 19 years were marked by fierce, intermittently interrupted warfare in the region, culminating in a prolonged period of peace negotiations in 1562. While conflict between Christian and Muslim powers intensified on one continent, the Ottomans also faced hostility in the Middle East. In 1534, Suleiman launched the first of three recurring campaigns against Persian opposition. The Ottomans and the Shah's forces engaged in a prolonged chess-like exchange of territory until the campaign concluded with a peace treaty in 1544, securing several important gains for the Ottomans. During this time, Ottoman naval power flourished under Admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa, achieving great success against European allied forces near the coasts of Greece. The reach of Ottoman naval influence extended as far as the Indian Ocean, where it directly challenged Portuguese dominance. Furthermore, Suleiman's reign expanded the scope of Ottoman influence in North Africa and even into relations with the Mughal Empire. Concluding a long and prosperous period of growth and consolidation, though not without occasional setbacks, Suleiman spent his final months at the Siege of Sigetvar, which resulted in a hard-fought Ottoman victory at the cost of tens of thousands of men, as well as the Sultan himself. With his brothers having previously died or been executed, Selim II became the new leader of the Ottoman Empire in 1566, the first of many to follow a similar pattern. Selim's dominance and real authority were often undermined by the power of Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, his Grand Vizier, and by the women of his harem, most notably his wife. Largely uninterested in a life saturated with politics, the new Sultan chose to leave much of the administrative responsibility in the hands of the Grand Vizier. Nevertheless, Selim's reign was marked by the replacement of war with peace in regions previously contested by his father. The first treaty was signed in 1568, establishing a new wave of non-aggression with Austria, reflecting the most recent truce between the Ottomans and the Safavids. Although a rebellion in Yemen emerged shortly afterward, it was quickly suppressed. The only major conflicts faced during Selim's reign followed the seizure of Cyprus in 1570. The same year a peace treaty was concluded in Constantinople with Russia under Ivan the Terrible. Subsequently, due to the aforementioned antagonism in Europe, the Battle of Lepanto followed in 1571, granting Venice only a temporary victory until the following year. By 1574, the Ottomans had secured Cyprus and Tunis before the death of Sultan Selim II, leaving the empire in the hands of Murad III. In stark contrast to his father, Murad III ruled during a period marked by both conflict and a decline in cohesion within the empire. The events in Morocco in 1578, culminating in the Battle of Alcácer Quibir, and the subsequent expansion of Ottoman influence in the Persian region, ultimately led the Sultan to initiate a new wave of military engagements with Austria, conflicts that would continue into the following century. During this time, a notable alliance formed between certain Ottoman vassals and the Austrians. Despite the clear violation of the terms of existing agreements with the Ottomans, the period between 1570 and 1590 also marked a renewed phase of hostilities with the Safavid dynasty. Meanwhile, conditions within the Ottoman borders failed to improve. Constant warfare required higher taxation, leading to inflation and a rapid erosion of overall stability within the empire, even causing a decline in the reliability of the Janissary forces. Murad became only the second sultan after Selim II never to personally lead his armies into battle, and his authority was further undermined by the influence of the women of his harem. Murad's most remarkable achievement may have been the establishment of diplomatic relations with Queen Elizabeth I of England. Arguing that the Islamic and Protestant worlds had more in common with each other than either did with Roman Catholicism, the Sultan succeeded in concluding a trade agreement with the English monarch in 1581, granting priority to English merchants within Ottoman territory. These foreign relations outlived the Sultan himself, passing from the hands of Murad III to Mehmed III. As the final Sultan of the 16th century, Mehmed III came under pressure from the growing alliance between his European vassals and his Austrian enemy. Initially facing setbacks, he nevertheless recovered swiftly to defeat the Habsburg and Transylvanian forces at the Battle of Kerastes in 1596. The end of the 16th century brought only slightly improved fortunes, as peace was eventually reached through an agreement between the Ottoman Empire and one of its vassal leaders. This concludes part 2 of the rise and fall of the Ottoman Empire. If you enjoyed the video, like it and share it with friends, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming interesting videos.